Tom Norquist. Tom and team and everybody, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Anthony, for that warm welcome and for that great introduction. I'm Tom Norquist. I'm a white male. I'm wearing glasses. I have curly, sandy, and gray hair, wearing a red NFI, National Institute for Play logoed polo shirt. And in less than 2 weeks, I'll be 66 years old. Mia?
Hi everyone, I'm Mia Sundstrom. I am a young adult white female with blonde hair. I am wearing a white National Institute for Play shirt and I've got the blue core background.
And I'm Lauren Sundstrom, and I'm a white woman with blonde hair and a yellow NIFP shirt with the blue core background. And I'll just step in here for a minute to say it's just such an honor to be here with these three generations. I'm a huge fan of my dad and his work. And at the heart of my efforts is it's really a simple goal to carry on and amplify my dad's legacy at the National Institute for Play. His work has never been more relevant, and we're super excited to be here today and share all of that with you.
Thank you, Lauren. Gosh, I am so excited to have three generations of play here today. This is going to be some fantastic storytelling. I'm just super excited to learn from Lauren and Mia and the master, Dr. Brown. And play right now. Play is hot. Play is hot. Gosh, it seems like everywhere I go, I'm seeing something about play. I was just with my family at Disney, and their new marketing motto is to play in the park, and they've got all kinds of things. I did buy the T-shirt. You know, we in the past few years, the National Institute for Play has worked with over 25 significant organizations to help them with their play movement and their play needs. And you know, folks like Forbes, and you guys just came back from Aspen Ideas. You know, Professors for Play. We've done work with the International Playground Manufacturers Association on the value of play. We've done talks at the National Recreational Park Association, at the American Society of Landscape Architects. Play is hot. It's a hot topic, and I'm kind of curious, Stuart. Why don't you just tell us, how'd you get into this play thing?
Well, I suppose, like everybody else, I should say I'm obviously an aged white male with a granddaughter and a daughter and a good friend who represents the presidency of the National Institute for Play. And like my daughter Lauren, it's a real honor to be able to pontificate about play, because I've been spending about 60 years chasing it. So I can look forward to storytelling about why and how play has become so central in my life, and I think will become a more central preoccupation with the culture at large.
Okay. Next slide.
This is a picture of the University of Texas Tower in Austin, Texas. I'm going to take you back to August 1st, 1966, when I was walking down the hallway of Baylor College of Medicine in Houston, when the dean of the medical school stopped me. He was holding a portable radio, and I could hear gunshots from that portable radio that were coming from the top of this tower. And a young man who was later identified as Charles Whitman, 25-year-old ex-Marine, sharpshooter, Eagle Scout, no legal background whatsoever, had taken an armory to the top of this tower after killing his wife and mother the night before. He killed 14 people, wounded 32, and the dean was saying to me as a young psychiatrist, why don't you psychiatrists do something about this? Well, I thought there was some kind of paranoid nut on the top of the tower, but 3 hours later, I got a call from my chairman, a guy by the name of Sherbert Fraser, wonderful psychiatrist, and on the line was Governor John Connolly, and they said, we want you and a commission to try and figure out why this young man who was killed by vigilante off-duty police and a heroic person in the top of the tower, why he did this. And so August 1st, 1966, my role at the College of Medicine changed, and the next day I was standing in clotted blood at the top of this tower, which you can see in the below the clock is a parapet from which Charles Whitman directed his fire, lethal fire toward unsuspecting individuals who were killed or wounded. So for some 19 weeks thereafter, a large commission, well funded by the state of Texas, studied the life and death of Charles Whitman to try and figure out why he had done what he had done. And this included the taking of 35,000 brain sections from his remains. It had the chief of neurosurgery from Harvard and a group of very distinguished others who were part of this commission to try and determine what went on in the life and death of this young man to produce this kind of what was then the largest mass murder in the history of the US. And what the commission decided at the end of its very intensive, very detailed study, including going back 3 generations to see if there was increased violence in the heritage of Whitman's mother or father, and more, what this commission determined was the absence of play behavior, which had been thwarted by a very disturbed, very aggressive, very intelligent, and very driven father, meant that he did not know how to handle hostile, aggressive, and hidden otherwise impulses that erupted during periods of stress that were induced by his lifestyle at the University of Texas, and that his aberration, which was then seen as something really weird and unusual, was something we wanted to understand. And it was evident that the play element and the issues of his family background. His father was in the delivery room when he was born and said to the obstetrician, "We're now seeing the emergence of the next president of the United States." And at age 3, he was forcefully pressured into taking piano lessons, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there was a huge amount of stress that from April until August had impounded Charles Whitman's life with diaries and other things that we reviewed, but play became something that was really an illuminating factor that I was very driven to explain. Well, the next slide shows the next slide shows the inside of the Huntsville prison, where after a year of intensive review of the lives of 26 individuals in the Texas system whose only crime was homicide, we reviewed their lives and the lives of 250 matched controls to see whether there were common themes that undergirded this act of homicide. And lo and behold, all 26 of these young homicidal males had deficient play in their background as compared to the controls. Well, this, of course, at the time, back in the late 60s, I really was trying to explain what in the world is going on with play and the play deficiency. Well, the next slide will show that, if we can get to it, that one of the things that I tried to understand in the course of the years after the Huntsville prison and the Charles Whitman tragedy was, is there a genetic or a evolutionary issue that is associated with human violence? And Jane Goodall had published a monograph about two homicidal chimpanzees, Passion and Palm. And so I wrote to Jane and said, you know, I'm studying play and homicide. Can you tell me anything about these two homicidal chimps? And she wrote back an eloquent letter and said that, that the two homicidal chimpanzees were in a coalition. They were poorly mothered. They played less than any of the other chimpanzees she had seen. And by the way, she was coming for a seminar in California. And why didn't we meet? So we met, and I got active in the board of the Jane Goodall Institute, and Jane got ultimately active with us in studying play. But she arranged somewhat thereafter for me to get an arrangement with the National Geographic to study animal play in the wild, to see what the essential essence of play is in the common ecology that both humans, chimpanzees, and other animals have. And she said to me very, very poignantly, Stuart, you're never going to understand play unless you see it in the wild in Africa. And she was right. And I think the next slide shows a little bit more of what I learned during the years of the National Geographic, while also I was taking from my clinical practice and my teaching at the University of California, San Diego, residents, interns, social workers, psychology, interns, and the like, gaining an insight of through their reviews of the importance, nature, and essence of play. But here is a memorable picture of a wild male polar bear headed in a predatory gait toward that sled dog that is tethered, that you see with its mouth open, while the bear was clearly headed for making a meal out of this sled dog. However, something very magical happened. The sled dog went down into a play bow, wagged its tail. The bear changed its demeanor completely and became a fellow player. Here you see instead of the fighting of teeth and fangs of the bear and the dog in a fight to the death, is a play bite, an entirely different evidence of a whole different state of being that undertakes both these creatures. And the next one will show that the fangs of the bear are on the throat of the dog. However, they're in a state of being, which is a state of play. What has happened? How did this occur? What is going on in these two carnivorous mammals that are highly varied in their behaviors that allows them to establish what the next one will show, I believe, is a sense of empathy and trust between the two of them. Here are creatures that are hardwired for battle to the death, but also are hardwired for something more beneficent, something playful, something that, as I studied play more systematically, particularly in the animal world and with play scholars worldwide through the sponsorship of the Geographic, I began to see that we too are wired like this dog and this polar bear for play if we allow it to happen. The next. The next is a basic kind of phenomenon in human beings, which is kind of the grounding base of play. And what you see on the left-hand picture is eye contact between an infant that's safe and well-fed and dry and the mother. When they make eye contact, there is a mutual joyful smile that is exchanged between the two of them, which I will call and others will call attunement. And that attunement is also associated, if you wire them both up with electroencephalogram, which the right-hand picture shows, if you wire them up, then a wonderful researcher by the name of Alan Shore has followed in sequence what happens between the mother and infant, or caretaker and infant, when this eye contact occurs. What happens is that the right side of the brain, the creative side of the brain of each, is in synchrony, and there is this emergence, this eruption of joyful mutual exchange that establishes what you saw in the polar bear and the sled dog, an essential shift from into trust, empathy, and safety. And Alan has shown, and others have followed, this phenomenon to say this is the grounding base of play that is wired into all human beings as a significant part of how we get along with each other and why we're a social species. And I would love right now to have Tom tell us how he took this attunement knowledge and did something with it for humanity.
Thanks, Stuart. Next slide, please. So in my work with Stuart at the National Institute for Play, he did make us aware of attunement. In his book, I think it's on pages 81 through 83, it's very well explained, this phenomenon. It's still a relatively, in my life, new phenomena to me. And understanding that parent-child bond, it was much like I had with my father when he brought me my first set of golf clubs as a young child, and we had this just lock in each other, and just this amazing, amazing phenomenon. What I did was pretty simple. I took the attunement concept, and then I thought about a problem, a pain point in their industry with toddler swings designed for 2 to 4-year-olds that are installed 24 inches off the ground so other kids can't get in and get stuck. And the parent, the Consumer Product Safety Commission guidelines said the parent should stand aside the child and should push the child to help them learn how to swing, because at that young age they don't know how to torso lean, and they don't know how to pump their legs. And so that was a bit of an issue. We had some issues early on in the industry. If you look at that swing seat, the toddler swing seat, full bucket seat, we had to move the fulcrum to the chain up near the temple of the child, because the child's head is the heaviest part of their body at that time. And some aggressive parents would push them a little hard, and the kid would flip over upside down and be hanging there. And then you'd have to go rescue them. And I thought, okay, this is interesting. So maybe there's a way to create this natural attunement by raising the child's seat up. And then we spent years studying what that distance needed to be for safety reasons. And then having the parent or the caretaker or an older sibling in that eye-to-eye kind of phenomena. And we experimented with that at Auburn University in the School of Industrial and Graphic Design. We built prototypes. We then worked with the National American Society of Testing Materials to allow this type of a piece of equipment. We worked with some of our colleagues in the industry from a safety standpoint, met with the Consumer Product Safety Commission, showed them what we intended to do, and then we brought this to market. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see even Stuart with one of my granddaughters back in the boneyard in Alabama. swinging on a expression swing and enjoying it immensely. And then go to the next slide. So in addition to that, when we were developing this, we thought about children that may not have the ability to sit upright. And so we created a therapeutic version of the expression swing that was part of a wish that we did with Georgia Make-A-Wish. And it was a phenomenal experience. The mother had called me and said, my daughter grew up and is too big to fit in the expression swing, and I missed out on that opportunity. And I said, well, we have something in the works. How would you like to have the first one? And so a few years after the introduction of the original expression swing, we presented the family with this beautiful therapeutic expression swing.
Wonderful.
And it's brought tons of joy and is now a very common thing in public parks. And then the next slide, you'll see what I really think is one of my favorite expression swings, and that is you can have two younger children, maybe school-age children, to teens, to even adults, sitting eye to eye, looking at each other and experiencing that joy that you experience when you're moving your body through time and space in a swing, and you're activating your inner ear, which
Right.
a lot of times they talk about vestibular stimulation, which is directly related to our ability to balance and focus. All these are positive things. And this is my favorite because I envision a world with adults having swings like this and swinging together and having that attunement experience themselves, much like we have when we see an old friend from high school or
You
something.
bet.
So that's kind of the story behind it. And we're just grateful to you, Stuart, for bringing that awareness to us that we could then apply that to this type of a experience now that's worldwide.
Well, I would add, Tom, that one of the things that happens in the swinging process is a stimulation of all kinds of things in the brain that even foster learning new language, for example, or fostering the sense of risk taking, which is safe, or fostering the feeling of exuberance and joy that's shared with another person. This is so different than screen issues, and very important element. And I would add that one of the things that I recently left with the Aspen ideas was the sense that the expression swing, if activated worldwide, has huge fallout positively for the swinger and the swingee. So good for you that you crafted this and put it together, and that here we have examples of it.
Okay, next slide, please.
Now, one of the things that the years with the National Geographic, the animal study, and getting to know the neuroscientists, that some of whom are strictly involved in animal play research, and some of who are involved, such as Fraser Brown with the Romanian orphans that were neglected in terms of their early life, is the wiring of the human brain for play, and the subcortical, where the red dot is, evidence that that wiring is play related. And there are areas that, if you wanted to get technical, called the periaqueductal gray, and other areas in the subcortical area of the brain, that when stimulated by play triggering episodes from the environment, light up the brain. So that one of the wonderful payoffs for me in studying play is to learn that play is a deep survival wiring process that's a part of our survival necessity. So this slide could lead to a very long and boring discussion by me of circuitry, but we'll pass on to the next slide. This is an example of taking play histories. The 30 years or so after the Whitman example and the Huntsville prison study, and one other research-oriented study of felony killed drunken drivers, revealed that there is a certain efficacy that all of us, regardless of age, achieve from healthy play, and that there is a modicum of effect even in just a small amount of play deficit that leads to less optimism and less positive elements. So the idea of play from homicide to actually play as it is in some reviews of Nobel laureates that I've done is that there is evidence that a Nobel laureate who can't tell his work from his play is often very, very much better adjusted than somebody who doesn't have a play. So the play history, the play review, and the play activity for a lifetime has been shown to be, by my own personal research and that of others, and certainly supported by the objective animal play research, is definitely shown to be a substantive, and as Tom said at the beginning, a dawning awareness on the part of more and more of our culture, and particularly amongst professionals who study play, as a recognition that this is a fundamental element of human nature. Next one. Well, I'm going to show a picture of this because this is Mia, and Mia can be certainly identified more closely in the course of her life cycle by her mother, Lauren. So Lauren, why don't you begin to talk about, at least from this picture, about your experience with raising Mia.
Yeah, absolutely. And first, I'll say a lot of people ask me, what is it like to grow up as Dr. Brown's daughter? And I would answer, great, for sure. And I was raised in more of a free range era where there was just a ton of flexibility and not a lot of oversight from parents, which is all good. And I think we're kind of starting to return to that a little bit. But what's really most instructive, I guess I will also say that I do prioritize play every day and have done that really throughout my life. So I'm super grateful for that. But what's perhaps more instructive is the way in which it translated into how my husband and I raised our kids, because it gave us the courage and really the faith to say, all right, we're gonna do this. Like we're gonna really make this play thing a priority. We were fortunate enough to grow up or to live in Boulder, Colorado, which is a very playful town with a lot of alternative schools and philosophies, perhaps too many. But that supported us in that the kids started at a play-based preschool. Again, when a lot of kids are being pressured to read early and to go all academic quickly, which is a hard thing to resist. I'm sure many of the parents on the call can appreciate that. But the kids started at play-based schools, and then they went into a public charter school that was pretty darn alternative, self-directed, play-based, big outdoor education ethic, and also very few tests, grades, or homework. And so again, that was kind of a leap of faith, but because of Dr. Brown's work, we had the faith to say, all right, we're going to go with this. We're going to do it. And we're going to try to model play along the way. And this picture is really a fun one. And actually, so again, this is Mia when she was a little thing. It doesn't seem like it was that long ago. And another picture from this era would show her at the top of this rope. And this was at a local rec center in Boulder, the North Boulder Rec Center, great place. And she was in these little preschool, gymnastics classes. And one time I left to be elsewhere in the rec center, and she was in this class, and suddenly a herd of parents, these moms, came to get me, and they said, "Your daughter's at the top of the rope. She's something's wrong. Like it's so scary. She's at the top of the rope." And I thought, "Oh, all right. Well, she's over those foam blocks. It's all good." But I came back in, and sure enough, Mia was at the top of this rope, and then climbing down safely, and it was all good. And she had done this, totally on her own accord, through her own volition. No one had told her to do it. In fact, I think they had probably told her not to, just to swing and get off. And instead, she went up to the top of the rope. And so that was who she was. And again, because of this work, it's really nice to have the courage to honor that and to say, all right, she's somebody who needs to move. And that's been a thread along with this play thread, throughout the lives of the kids. They did end up going to a fairly traditional high school, and they're both college graduates now. And I think they would both say that the play thread, ran through their lives. So I'd love to hand this off to Mia, who can explain a little bit more. I'm sure we made plenty of mistakes along the way, but Mia will overlook those, and I'll hand it to her to explain a little bit more about her play personality and kind of the strength that's given her throughout her life.
Well, thank you. And I can't remember if I actually have the memory of climbing to the top of the rope or if I've just heard the story so many times, but I can't tell you why I chose to do that. I have no idea, other than I do kind of remember getting yelled at by the coach at the bottom after I did it. But just feeling completely immersed in the moment through the movement. And I mean, I just feel so lucky to have literally been born into this play family and to have experienced it and had it nurtured throughout my entire life, which I feel gives me this ability to speak about it from my firsthand experience and to help share the power of what it's like to be raised in a playful environment. And so I just could not be more appreciative of my mom and of my grandpa for really helping nurture this in me. And I am just so similar to what my mom said earlier. I'm just so enlivened by trying to continue Dr. Brown's legacy and the work that he has begun, because the world needs it so much, as all of you probably know too. But what's really, I think, unique and interesting is that my grandfather and my mom really identified my unique play nature early, as I would be running around and hanging from sinks and jumping off of things. And they're like, she really likes to move her body, and she doesn't learn as well when she's not moving her body. And so they put me in gymnastics. And I really fell in love with doing it for its own sake, which is this core element of play. And that deep intrinsic drive carried me the entire way through the sport. So even as there became more extrinsic pressures as I was getting better, and early specialization and all these things that can kind of take the play away, that deep innate intrinsic drive to move my body was steadfast and ended up actually taking me all the way to the Division I level at the University of Denver, where this is a picture where I had the privilege of competing for a national championship with an absolutely amazing team. And then I continued to follow my play personality and follow my bliss, as Grandpa Stuart would say, into coaching, where I was able to coach at the University of Denver at the Division I level, and to coach athletes where the pressure to perform is so high all the time, and a lot of them are getting paid for it and trying to balance it with school, and a lot of them came from backgrounds that were much less playful than mine through the sport, and to really try and take a play-centered approach to helping the athletes thrive and perform. And that's also really non-traditional in sports. You see at the highest levels that there's so much rigidity and so much structure and a lot less free play than you would maybe anticipate, because of this pressure to perform that's put on by, intrinsically, and also by universities and societies. And it's this, we could talk for a whole webinar about that alone. But I really tried to stay grounded in this playful approach, because I had witnessed and experienced the power of this flow state that comes in these high pressure moments of just coming back to doing it for its own sake, for the joy of it, for the play personality and whatnot. So I'd love to, with that kind of segue, again, I can't take credit for any of this. They just like put me in the right lane and then let me go. So this is not my doing. But I would love to segue into in the next slide, talking about play personalities more broadly, because my play personality was very clear, and it was as a kinesthete, which you'll see on here, as I was just a mover. I moved my body, but that's not playful for everyone. In fact, for some people, it's not at all. And what Dr. Brown did when he referred to these thousands of play histories that he's taken is he began to notice some patterns in play predilections and activities. And from those patterns, he's developed these 8 play personalities. And they're not meant to be rigid or profiling. They're just meant to offer a helpful framework to better understand how you most naturally like to play. And so for some people, these predilections they're a joker. They use humor and silliness and pranks, and they're the ones who lighten any room. There's the explorer, which Anthony actually mentioned he is at the beginning of this call. And these are the people who really love to discover and travel and idea seek, whether that's physically or emotionally. There's the competitor. These are the people who genuinely play their best when they are in it to win it or lose it. And maybe those are a little more rare, but these are our crazy fantasy leagues or board games or sports or whoever, the people who love all of that. We have the director. Those are the people who play by organizing or planning experience for others, the party hosts, the project leaders, the people who might love to like clean out their junk drawer as a form of play, which may not be for many of us. There's the collector. So these are people who love to gather or curate things or experiences, whether that's collecting stamps or cars or even collecting stories or memories. There's the artist and creator. I wish I had more of this in me. These are the people who love to make things, to design, craft, code, cook, whatever that looks like for them. And then lastly, there's the storyteller. And I think my grandpa would say he has transitioned from a kinesthete to a storyteller in the last couple of years. And these are the people who play using imagination and narrative, the writers, the actors, daydreamers, people who can tell a captivating story in any situation. And so these are the 8 play personalities. And it doesn't mean that you're going to fit perfectly into one category or that maybe it won't even change over time as you have new life experiences. But this is really just meant to be a framework to say, how do I play? As a kid, how did I do this? As an adult, how do I do this? Have I stuck with my play personality as I've gone through my life, or have I deviated from it in some way? So again, I love this framework, and I think it's amazing that Dr. Brown created these to just help us all get back in touch with the way that we play. And you can go on to the next slide here. All right, so my grandpa talked about the extremes of what can happen when we're deprived of play in the case of Charles Whitman and the homicidal Texas prisoners. But let's spend a moment talking about what happens when we do play. So play is a form of nourishment, really. Even like sleeping and eating are forms of nourishment. So first off, it really helps reduce our stress. When we play, our amygdala, which is the store of, memories that trigger fight or flight, so like our stress response, it calms down and becomes less reactive. In a state of play, we are quickly reacting to changing stimulus and moving our brain and our body in different ways than we normally would. And that's what builds adaptability. Our prefrontal cortex sort of loosens control and creates this environment where we can fail and retry and fail again without being too self-conscious or feeling like we need to stop. And this is the building block for resilience. So play creates this base for resilience and adaptability. It also helps with creativity, right? It enables our brains to move in different ways and activates our reward circuitry so we become more optimistic by these emotions like joy and awe and glee being evoked and giving us this sense of agency and freedom that we don't have in other states. And when we play with others, as my grandpa mentioned, and as Tom talked so well about with the attunement swing, when we play with others, we become attuned with them. And it's like the polar bear and the sled dog example, our differences begin to dissolve. We're reminded of what we have in common, and our mirror neurons start to light up so that we can mirror the activities of others, which is this basis for connection and then eventually belonging. And I think too, when we play with others, we end up learning how to play fair, how to empathize with people, how to figure out what we're doing, how to continue to get to learn and understand how other people work. And so this becomes the basis for a deep emotional intelligence as well. So we can go on to the next slide here. So really, I think this key that we talk about, right, is the play deficit, which my grandpa spent a lot of time on at the beginning, creates this behavioral deficiency. And we just talked about the great things that can improve our mental health when we play. So we need to bring it back to this nexus as a public health necessity. And that is just a super important part of what we're all trying to do here at the National Institute for Play and PlayCorps. All right, you can go on to the next slide. So the moment for play is now. We are in a society where that is increasingly individualistic, where loneliness is a problem, where we're seeing these mental health issues, where there's an anti-social media movement, where there's a work-life balance movement, and riding the coattails of this multi-trillion-dollar industry is this idea of play and how we need to bring it back into public consciousness, and how maybe 200 years ago, this was something that humans did naturally that we have forgotten how to do. So that's what we're doing. And Tom talked so much about kind of how that's bringing back into public consciousness earlier. So I won't hit on that too much more. But just to say that the moment for play is now, and we're all so excited to be part of this moment. Next slide. All right, I'll pass it back over to Anthony.
All right, well, that was fantastic. So we do have a couple questions for the group right now we can jump into. So the first one, this person asked, does play need to be physical to be beneficial?
I can answer that. Definitely not. If you are involved in imagination while you're reading a novel, you're at play, and you don't have to be physical to enjoy a moment of play, even if you're sedentary.
All right. And so this next question, you were talking a little bit about play deficiency and its root cause to violence and tragedy that we talked about earlier. And so do you feel as though giving people constructive ways to engage or the right resources, or I guess, tools and toys and things of that nature is something that you can really give a child early on to help them have that positive experience?
I guess I can answer that again. When we went back with a team from Baylor and Austin to study Charles Whitman's life, and we went systematically through his childhood through the eyes of relatives, friends, and others. I remember Robert Stubblefield, a child psychiatrist who was a head of psychiatry for the Southwestern Medical School, lamented time and again, saying that at each stage of development, Whitman didn't play. And he said again and again, if only he had played, that this would have given him alternatives, resiliency, flexibility that he didn't ever get in the terms of his hiding his violent feelings from others, which were nonetheless there and unresolved. So I think the part of the reason that play has persisted as a part of our evolutionary heritage is that it diminishes interpersonal violence and allows for tolerance. And Mia indicated some of that in her review, and I would certainly emphasize that again.
All right, well, we've got some more questions coming in, so this is good. And again, if you have questions, feel free to put them in here. We've got some time on this webinar, so we should be able to get through these. So this next question to the general group is about intergenerational play developing. So what are your thoughts on that, and how do you see intergenerational play developing going forward?
Intergenerational play is so important and powerful. Sometimes it can be hard for generations to connect, but again, when play dissolves our differences, we all learn how to play. And I think intergenerational play is one of the strongest builders of tradition as well, whether that's a family card game or a certain nature place that families love to attend together. That intergenerational play is sort of the richness of connection and relationships across generations, and it doesn't have to be something crazy. Maybe it's that you love to paint with your grandma, or you love to sing with your grandpa, or you love to whatever. It can be a small and simple activity but it can really be amazing to bring generations together. And particularly, we've seen in so many different cultures the power and richness of tradition. So the intergenerational play is really a way to do that well.
Great comments, Mia, and I'll add a little. Dance is just a wonderful form of intergenerational play.
Yes.
And I experience that with my grandchildren, and it's just so fun. And Stuart and I, we started a seminar off in the kingdom of Saudi Arabia with a dance, and we got the whole crowd just going. And it just, dance is a wonderful free form of play that we all can experience together. And then on another side of this, inclusive environments that are designed and built. My work with the International Standards Organization is we're working right now on an inclusive standard for open spaces. How do we, let a broad variety of abilities and ages come together in that environment and play? And there's been some interesting research that Robin Moore and Nilda Costco did, showing families in an inclusive environments using the equipment together, and showing that the number one use of mobility device was a stroller, as the whole family made their way through and in and on and under and over that wonderful play experiences. So there's just a lot going on with intergenerational play, and it should be something that we as a society are focusing on every day because it brings us all together.
So, kind of jumping, I know that's a good segue into our next set of questions. I'm actually going to combine a couple here. And so there's three questions really about adults. And I know that a lot of times we focus on, children and youth, and we're jumping off an intergenerational play question. So what are what's your advice for engaging adults themselves, getting adults to be more playful, to maybe, Tom, you had mentioned dance, maybe somebody is a bit self-conscious, maybe helping encourage them past that, being out there, being silly. As an adult, we are more conscious of yourself. And so how would you start them? And then when you've got adults playing, what is your advice on sustaining that so they don't just give it up when the event or the day is over?
I'll try and start with that, but
Okay.
starting, oh, you want to go, Mama?
Go ahead,
You were
go ahead,
open your
you're
mouth.
good.
No, you go. Okay. But I mean, first of all, it comes from using this science to recognize that you have permission to play, and that it's not frivolous, and that it's not a waste of time, and that it needs to be on your priority list. And so to not let it fall to the wayside is kind of the first way to get adults playing again, is to say, this is a health necessity and I will do this, and it's going to be a priority. And then
Absolutely.
to beyond kind of the next step of that is to really be able to reflect and think about, how do I play, and to identify with your play personality a little bit more. Like if painting is not play for you, then don't paint. Like that's okay. Go out and dance instead. But find those activities that are play triggers for you, so that enable you to get into that play state. There's no right way to do it. It's whatever works best for you. And if you need to think back on your childhood to figure that out, then do that. And then I think the last piece is then surround yourself with those play triggers, whether that's your dog that gets you into that play state, whether that's your child, whether that's a friend or an activity, so that you are constantly sort of surrounded by these triggers that remind you to play as just part of your everyday life. Go ahead and jump in now.
Yeah, I'll jump in. So there was a survey done in the UK last year, late last year, of 2,000 adults, and fully 2/3 of them said they wished they could let go and play more, but they didn't really know how, and they felt that if they did play, they would be less productive. And that's just really hogwash, because the productivity piece, if you're playing, you're going to be more productive in your life. We all know that productivity isn't just spinning a lot of things out, it's aligning with who you are and with your values, and play can help get you there. So again, we just want to give people permission to do this. It's going to make your life better in every regard. And the second part of that survey said that the average age at which people lost touch with their play nature was 29. So again, this is a question we get a lot. How do we do this? How do we get back to that play nature? So I think Mia answered it well, but I just wanted to add some of those stats there.
That's
So
outstanding.
kind of building on that, the topic of play in adults, we do have a couple other questions in here, and I'll combine them. So, this person is asking, can play be introduced to adults later in life as a way to rehabilitate homicidal or other violent behavior? And then again, in the case of Whitman, would a form of play have been beneficial to his mental health after his service in the military? So I guess that's asking, engaging with adults as a form of, therapy, right? For something PTSD related, potentially with the military, or if somebody already has violent tendencies, is play a way to kind of curb that and put them on a more positive path?
I can answer that. I'm reviewing a book that's going to be out in October where play is used to deal with both post-traumatic stress disorder and with people who have lost the capacity to play. And the evidence from a very seasoned therapist who's writing this book is that the introduction of play itself produces emotional change, so that the very thing, the anger, the rigidity, the vengeance, that those emotions are modified when the experience of play, particularly if it's a therapeutic arrangement where there's trust, where that happens, the individual is less violent. The Whitman situation was such an extreme that it was probably an aberration. However, I have certainly, as a therapist, had the anger and vengeance kind of preoccupations damped down when the individual finds their own play nature.
And you have some stories about that, and we have a little bit of time. How about talking about maybe the story with the play nature and dance with one of your patients that you worked with?
Well, I think the one that comes to mind is a very depressed woman who had an extremely difficult childhood, multiple foster homes, sexual abuse as a youngster, and she said, there's no joy in my life. And I remember finding that she really did have some joy in listening to jazz music. And so I got her a baton and had her conduct jazz music that she loved. And in that process, she lightened up and she joined a dance group and was transformed. So, that's just a story. That's the one that comes to mind.
Right, that's it. That was it.
Okay.
So I'm gonna group these next questions together as well too and summarize them. So this is about advocating for play. So one individual is saying that, they want to advocate more for play and make it a priority as a public health priority, but maybe some adults don't take the word seriously. Or they want to have tools and resources or message to convince naysayers that play is a necessity, not a frivolity. For an example, they gave a lack of play in schools. And the last person, they're talking about where they live, rough and tumble play is seen as problematic, even though the science supports the value. So what advice would you give these individuals on their journey to advocate for this as they're going to take this information and try to make a change in their community?
First, it's amazing that you want to do that. So thank you, because we're all in this together. That's the main message. And
Yes.
we run into that all the time too. And that's why Dr. Brown's work is so powerful, to truly ground this in neuroscience and to be able to say play is biologically hardwired into all of us. Period. End of story. Moving on. Don't question it. So yeah, but it's tricky. I mean, we all run into that for sure. I think using words that are catching the mainstream wind, like wellness and around the mental health and public safety, and words that people are more accustomed to hearing in terms of like a necessity in accompaniment with the word play, is definitely useful. But yeah, Dr. Brown, I'll let you answer that one.
Well, I think the science is, from my standpoint, is getting so solid that play deficiency is, to me, like the sailors who didn't get vitamin C in medieval times getting scurvy. There is a toxic effect on all of us at any age if we have severe play deficit. So I think having an understanding that this is really an important part of being fully human is, part of our mission as the National Institute for Play, and part of what you and Lauren, and I think, and I have demonstrated by our lives, and Tom certainly does.
I think in addition to that, there's some great resources available. Playcorps helped publish a piece that Stuart wrote on the science of play, and it's a bunch of fabulous information that's available. The National Institute for Play, NIFPlay.org, is a plethora of information, articles, book reviews, outstanding testimonials on why play scientifically is so important, great examples. Those are resources that are available to you and the public. And I think that, using these materials will be very helpful. Lauren, you might want to help me with some of that.
Yeah, I would just say, again, we have a ton of resources. We're trying really hard to get the message out. Honestly becomes almost a marketing campaign to answer your question. We're doing more partnerships and affiliations. We had a really fun partnership last year with Visit California, where they were branding California as the ultimate playground. And they kind of said, hey, help us here and give us some scientific backing because we're really serious about this. And so we did, and we felt good about that because our work was kind of then being, they have a lot of celebrity spokespeople and that sort of thing. And so these celebrities were taking our work and just putting it out there into the airwaves. And so that was terrific. So we're doing what we can to help support all of your efforts and, again, allow people the freedom and permission to play.
Well, this is a quick one. Is there a minimum amount of play that should be done per day or week for it to be beneficial?
Minimum amount.
I think for some people, if it's a state of mind that they carry with them all the time, so that it isn't whether they're playing ping pong at noon or taking a hike, it's a part of their essential psychic centrality. But so that I think if you do the reviews like I did, and someone has had let's say an adult in their middle age can't remember the last time they played, they're in trouble.
I think too, like what we talk about with exercise a lot of, like, one of the barriers to exercising for people is that if they don't have a full hour, it's not going to happen. It doesn't fit into their day. But really what we've learned is even 10 minutes of exercise or a 5-minute walk is like better than nothing. So I think the mindset, if you're having a hard time fitting play in, is that anything is better than nothing. Even if it's a 30-second or a 1 minute, 5-minute, 10-minute break in your day, that is still worth something to get you started.
And Stuart has taught me over the last couple of decades of working together that he said many times to me that, if you're having a tough time with a problem and you're stuck, just leave it and go do something fun, go play, free your mind up, and amazingly behind the scenes things happen, and you get this idea all of a sudden. It's like, oh, I know the answer to that. Okay, we'll just go do this. But that is just magic. That is one of the most wonderful things that you gave to all of us, is just being able to have that mindset.
No, it's just part of who we are.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to pivot a little bit. So I'm going to combine a couple other questions here. So this individual asked, how can business owners leverage CORE's research and your research as well and knowledge to help justify incorporating play into our business? And the other person also asked the benefits of play for a business setting. So when you're thinking about that environment, what are some ways that you would give them advice on incorporating play into more of a business environment as opposed to, say, a school or recreation center?
I mean, that's right up my alley. I mean, that's so it's going from cubicle to an open, more shareable environment where there's more trust. And then walking meetings. I mean, my goodness gracious, walking meetings are the best meetings because you're moving and you're getting stimulus as you're having the conversation, and just creating an environment that is playful. We're working right now in our studio at Auburn and creating and not putting in tons of structure, but leaving it more open so that we can expand and have our ideas and our ideation part of our work environment. It's much like what Brendan did at IDEO and the way their offices were set up, where you had tons of, if you like to draw, if you like to write, just give me give me a wall, okay, and you can draw all over that wall. Give me something I can put pictures up and create art with, and we can discuss and ideate. Create an area in your business where you can have what we call green light thinking, where there's no bad ideas, and have sessions where people from all levels in the company can contribute to that brain trust of who you are, and what you're accomplishing, what products you're developing, what services that you offer. Just be open, air. Don't structure is very, very difficult with if you want to expose that creative mind.
Way to go.
I think too, the fact that you're willing to ask that question about bringing play into business means you're already thinking differently than your competitors, and that's already an advantage to creativity and innovation. And it really starts from leadership and being able to model that you are okay with failure and mistakes and creativity, just like Tom was just saying about creating the spaces and the structures and the people and the places to like enliven this play piece of things. But it can, same thing as in your own personal life, it can be something simple. It can be a 3-minute playful icebreaker to start a meeting instead of just a check-in and see how you're doing. It can be a creative word wall. It can be all of these things. But if it starts from leadership, then it bleeds into the culture, and the culture bleeds into the innovation and the output of the company. And I think the only other thing we're really interested in exploring and feels like an untapped space is how can you use the play personalities of all of your employees and really enliven and flourish those within a work setting? Like I was working with a salon the other day and they're like, we have a really awesome joker and I had no idea that they were a joker. And so instead of putting them at the back of the store doing organization, they're going to be at the front of the store meeting clients because their play personality is actually going to help promote business. So finding ways for people to engage with their play personalities through their work is a really interesting kind of thing we'd love to explore more.
So that's actually a good segue to this question this gentleman had. Have you compared the play personality to some of the other business personalities? So Tom, you and I, or yeah, Tom, you and I just went through Clifton Strengths as a team a couple weeks ago. And there's also Working Genius and a few others. And so I was reading about being an explorer and how that aligned with my Clifton Strengths about, ideation and exploring and trying things and talking to people. And so has there been any further research on your end with how they align with some of the stuff that's out there?
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah,
Okay.
wonderful. Thank you. That's
Yeah.
a wonderful future.
Very good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So next question, pivoting a little bit, this individual asks, and this is something as a park and rec professional I've often kind of faced in my career as well too. Research or recess and play is such a big thing for school age children, but then when you get to middle school and high school teenagers, it looks different, right? And so this individual is trying to support school districts to support more play and playgrounds for middle schoolers and high schoolers. Do you have any specific research that is tailored for teenagers or aware of it that they could use to take to a school district and advocate for that?
Well, Augur Jarrett in Georgia has done a lot of work with the benefits of recess. I'm not sure that it's applied to beyond middle school, but the evidence that allowing recess more time increases academic performance in the long term than narrowing your recess time to emphasize academic excellence. That the recess time gives increased creativity, better learning, less irritability in the class, etc. So the evidence that I have a file in my computer on recess, and the evidence is very solid that the more open recess times produce a really good academic result. And Jill Violet in Playworks has cataloged increased structured good recess time in high-risk inner city schools is associated with diminished dropout, better teacher morale, and a better parent-teacher rapport than when there is attenuated recess.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in here too. Part of this K-8 charter school that I mentioned that the kids went to here in Boulder, they had this concept called Dream Homework, where they let kids take a project and run with it for the whole school year. I realize that's hard to incorporate into a lot of traditional curriculums, but that was a really nice way for kind of middle schoolers to pursue something that they loved. It wasn't exactly recess, but it was their own form of joy and motivation. And also there was a story that appeared in the New York Times in May of this year that really struck me. It talked about how middle school play changes, middle school, high school. And there was a girl interviewed where she talked about how she was having trouble with coding. She was in a coding class and it was really hard. And so she decided to create this little rubber duck and talk to her rubber duck as if it were alive and helping her coding. And she said that introducing that object into this academic environment helped her overcome her problems. And I thought that was just a great story. There were other stories of kids going out and fishing together. Again, you know, you need a little bit of time to do this in an academic environment. So I think it comes back to the leadership of the schools and this broader message that play needs to be incorporated more broadly.
All right, well, we are rounding out our time. So if we didn't get to your question, we will cut and paste the questions into a Word document and share with our panelists today. So and we'll upload that to our system as well once they're answered. You could also email us at core@playcore.com with a specific question and we'll make sure it gets in front of them. So we wanted to, again, we're celebrating Park and Recreation Month and Build Together, Play Together, National Institute for Play, PlayCore. We really want to take this opportunity to celebrate all of you and the work that you do and have a conversation that is based around play. And that's not just park and rec professionals, that's school districts, that's landscape architects, that's other municipalities. There's different groups out there. And it's so important in shaping the future of generations, their future minds, everything that goes into it. And I think we all have a personal play story. I know that myself growing up, I was somebody that was raised as an only child, in school, I was a little bit heavier set, taller, tend to get bullied, pushed around a little bit. And, the fact that I could go out and play and be out in nature and find my confidence and do all these things was really transformative for me. And now even as an adult, pickleball is a huge play sport that adults of all ages are getting involved in. And it's not just for kids, but the benefits and the social, emotional health and mental health benefits of play are so important. And the science is so sound. And we really wanted to have a conversation with a group of thought leaders that could help you continue to advocate for that, to think differently, that it's more than just what we do, putting programs together. Myself as a former recreation professional, I know how hard you're all working right now. And this was really a celebration of you and to give you more tools and resources to continue to advocate in that direction, why we celebrate Park and Rec Month. And so beyond that as well, too, you'll find in the handout section these resources. So the power of play, some other research that we have about Play On, the 7 principles of inclusive playground design, the science of play that we talked about earlier, Dr. Brown, Pathways for Play, a link to the National Institute for Play, and you will be able to find a link so you can take the quiz and find out what your play profile is as well. And again, I'm an explorer, so I'm interested to hear what many of you have. And if you know me personally, I'm also interested to see if you agree with that. We want you to mark your calendars because the conversation is going to continue on throughout the year. So in October, we'll have part 2 of our series, Living a Healthier, Playful Life with Bowen F. White. And then December 9th, the Power of Play, Losing and Finding Ourselves Through Everyday Play, where we'll get a chance to dive a little bit deeper into that resource that we talked about earlier. Next up as well, too, we continue celebrating the 35th anniversary of the American Disability Act with our Beyond the Minimum series, part 3, Advancing Play Accessibility, Accessible Standards to Modern Playgrounds in August. And then on November 19th, we're going to have a Therapeutic Recreation Roundtable. Outside of these events, we invite you to join us talking about inclusive play in motion, GPS and activity data. We're going to talk a little bit about funding and then community connectedness through aquatic design and programming. And if you are attending ASLA for landscape architects or the National Recreation Park Association, please come see us. We'd be more than happy to talk with you, dive back into these conversations, and continue advocating for play across all of our communities. Again, to receive your continuing education units, visit education.playcore.com, go to your dashboard, complete the survey and quiz, and you have until July 27th at 11:59 p.m. Additional resources, the questions you'd like to send us, core@playcore.com, more resources at education.playcore.com, and resources and our funding tool as well, which you're going to dive into a little bit more in November. And we want to say thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you to our panelists. It was wonderful to have you all with us and hear your stories. And again, thank you to everybody for all the hard work you're doing during Park and Recreation Month.
All right.
Thank you.